Good evening, everybody. I don't know about you, but I'm fired up because we are on Fire Up. Hope you had a great
Yeah.
weekend. Segue intended. You know that's what it is. Good evening, everybody. My name is Scott Morgan, Roth the Motor City Madmouth. Glad to have you on tonight. And our main focus of conversation tonight, we're going to be recapping the Kentucky Derby. We're going to talk about handicapping spring football, and we're also going to talk about the National Hockey League and the NBA, the two games that went in overtime. With that said, so I hope you can stay with us for the entire broadcast. I'm going to introduce the crew right to left. All right, Smoking Jeremy B, welcome back, my friend.
Glad to be here, ready to talk some sports.
And Chris Pirtle, welcome back. Been off a little bit of time, but we're going to get him back in the regular rotation, right, CP?
Thank you, Scott. Good to be with you tonight.
And John Ryan, I'll tell you, I could drag him in anywhere when my instincts start telling me we need to bring this cat on, man. And we got the show for him tonight, John. Hope you had a good weekend.
Glad to be here, and looking forward to talking about the weekend.
All right, and last but not least, George Eichhorn.
Good evening, Scott and fellows. Good to be on. Thank you.
George Eichhorn, fresh off of Basket Bros yesterday. And hello, Will Vogel. Good evening to you. I'm sure that Will provide some time and comments in the chat room, but let's get right to it. All right, Jeremy, we're going to do a little bit of recapping of the Kentucky Derby. And by the way, I'm wearing a little Kentucky hat that I got over at the truck stop. Don't know if you can see the big state of Kentucky, but it's on there anyways to signify that when you get a hat, you never know what is going to come into play. All right, Jeremy, go ahead. Let's recap this.
All right. At fourth place, we had Disarm. At third place, we had Angel of Empire. In second place, we had Two Fills. In first place, by a whole length, was Mage. Angel of Empire was a half length behind Two Fills, and Disarm was a half length behind Angel of Empire. So it was a very close-knit race at the top.
So, did you watch the race, Smoking?
Yes, I actually did.
What were your overall impressions of that race?
It's always fun to watch horse racing because I used to ride horses myself. I never raced them, but I did ride them. But it looked a little different than what I remember. That's all.
Okay. All right. Well, John Ryan, this is your business here, handicapping. So what I want you to do, John, before we talk about this Kentucky Derby, why don't you recap what you talked about on last Monday night when we were previewing the race?
Well, we recapped to recap the race. We had 5 scratches that most of them occurred after our show. So for the first time in many, many years, my handicapping, for the show, even on Tuesday and Wednesday, was going up in smoke, and I had to restart. And what I found more difficult and more of a challenging this year than any other Kentucky Derby was in my superfectas, who am I going to put in that third and fourth row?
Mm-hmm.
There was so many 50-1 shots, and which is that one that's going to, wreck most of the pyramids and, most of all help mine. And I think I might have, in hindsight, put too much focus on that, and I didn't see Mage as a winner. Honestly, I don't think anybody really, saw that coming, but it happened. And, at 15-1, that was a horse that I had in my second row. I had Angel of Empire to win. I hated it when I got Angel of Empire right before our show last Monday at 10-1. So that was one of the favorites. I had Forte as well, and I don't like playing favorites, as all you guys know that. I just feel like I'm making a bad decision right away. And then all of a sudden, Angel of Empire, because of the scratches, becomes the favorite. And I just was like, oh, this is not feeling good. But I went through the research again. Angel of Empire, very fast horse, great closer. But in watching the race, like Smoking was saying, it was different. I was watching with a couple buddies and families, and I literally blurted out on the home stretch, where the heck is Angel of Empire? And then all of a sudden, Angel of Empire appears. And unfortunately, I think if the race would have gone 50 more yards, we would have had a different winner. But that's not what the race is all about. The point I'm trying to make is I think Angel of Empire if they have the same jockey, has now the experience. Pimlico is going to be an eighth of a mile shorter. There's not that pressure for the jockey to determine when he's going to let the horse, go and release at full speed to chase down everybody. And I like Angel of Empire already, even though the race is almost 2 weeks out. So that was my number one takeaway, was that it was monumentally different to handicap, very difficult to handicap because of all the scratches and unfortunate deaths that occurred during the week. That's sad enough. But for the Preakness, I gotta think Angel of Empire is going to be very high on my list.
Hey, John, I was going to ask you too, what about the track conditions? How crucial is the track conditions, whether it's going to be wet or dry or muddy sometimes? That's also tough to predict, obviously, if you're a prognosticator.
Oh, it is. Absolutely. And Angel of Empire on a muddy track, I don't think I would have had Angel of Empire to win. And I was watching the weather, because the weather forecast a week before the event was forecasting for, showers and possible thunderstorms. And it was a concern. It definitely impacted my decision making going into it. But then as the week wore on and you saw that it was going to be cloudy, overcast, possibility of a shower went down substantially, then I became more bullish on the closers and the faster horses. I would have loved to have seen Forte and Angel of Empire go head to head, and just to see who would win. Because I think if Forte would have been in, we'll never know the answer to it, but I do think each horse would have benefited from each other had they known, okay, well, I know that horse. All right, well, that's a good horse for me to be following. And it would have been a totally different race. I think Angel of Empire was just out there on an island and was just listening to the commands of the jockey, and, it didn't work out. But a great win for Mage, too. I mean, it was fantastic.
So,
And,
John,
let's take away. I mean, this might be a little controversial, Scott. I hope it's okay to say. I didn't mind not seeing Bob Bafford's face on TV for 90% of the time.
well, it's funny how you just say that, John. I was just about to ask you a question about Bob Baffert. So if that's controversial, you following the GMTA thing. Great minds think alike. So, all right, so let's go ahead and let me follow up with what you just said, John, okay? The Bob Baffert effect, okay? Talk to me about it, because obviously we know why he isn't there. But was it refreshing not to see Bob Baffert there? Or maybe you might I don't know whether it's called leveling the playing field, but it certainly felt different.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even know how to put that into words, or even try to quantify that fact. Part of me thinks that there are horses that maybe were trained a year ago by him that now are with a different trainer who may have been able to enter the race that way, where the owners actually leave that trainer and go to somebody else, but somehow Baffert's still involved. I don't really want to believe that that's true, because that really is even worse against the rules and why he's suspended. But it's like so many other characters we've had in all organized sports, especially at the professional level. There's polarizing people that we just don't like. George Steinbrenner, go rest his soul. People either loved him or they absolutely, abhorred him. There was no in between, like, oh yeah, George is a good guy. Yeah, I like George. He's all right. It was either one or the other. It was either I love him, he's the greatest guy in the world, or he wasn't. So I think Baffert is, become that type of character in the big events of horse racing. And, you'll never be able to take away his credit from all the races he has won. All right. He wasn't disqualified in those races. And it kind of brings up, the steroid era in baseball. They broke records because the commissioner, in my opinion, Bud Selig, knew that steroids was running rampant through baseball. And anybody who knows sports, I think, would agree with me that everybody knew it was happening, but we wanted to see it. We wanted to see those 550-foot home runs. We wanted to see the record broken. And I think Baffert is kind of the same guy. When, he had all those horses every year, he was the favorite. Every year coming into that Kentucky Derby, he'd be you'd have 3 horses in it, and one of them would probably be a top-notch favorite.
Yep.
So you have to
I
give
lo-
him credit there, but the mistakes made with the performance-enhancing drugs cannot be denied, and he's serving a sentence now. So that's my takeaway with him.
And well, you know what? Before I put Chris Pirtle out there, let's get this comment of Will Vogel. And you know what? John, read it.
I agree with what you said about Baffert, Mr. Ryan.
There you
I said a
go.
lot about Baffert. Which comment is he referring to?
Well, probably a lot of what you had to say. All right, Chris Pirtle, you've been patiently waiting in the wings. So, what are your thoughts about the Kentucky Derby?
Well, I must be honest. I didn't watch it. I was in Louisville, Kentucky 2 weeks ago, so that's about as close as I've come to the action at Churchill Downs.
Right.
I do have to ask this, John. Was there any horses anyway, I should say, that you saw at relatively around 25 to 50 to 1 that you liked going into the race?
I'll be honest, I did not, and that's what made the handicapping so hard when I do these superfectas and even the exacta. Kind of proud to say my next door neighbor actually hit the exacta on a $12 ticket for $1,900, and you know what? The family picked the horses by the name that they liked. He picked the favorite, and then who came in third, and then the other 2 were picked by his wife and the young kids. So maybe that's the strategy I should use next year.
Well, you know what? I got to tell you guys a really, really fun story when it comes to greyhounds. I really do. And then as soon as I do that, I'm going to give ourselves a little station identification first. Okay. But I remember going to a baseball convention, not so much a convention, but a seminar out in El Paso, Texas. I go to Juarez Dog Tracing track, across Juarez, Mexico. I saw this dog called Bill Walton, and I decided, what the heck? I don't really see if the dog Bill Walton would be better than the one that got busted up later on. I bet on him and lost, but boy, it certainly was worth the story that I could tell each of you guys. So the Greyhound was as bad as the guy that was latter part of his career all busted up. All right, with that said, before I proceed any further, the audio version of Fire Up can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. So there you go. You can listen to it. If that's good enough or not good enough, please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube South Florida Tribune. We're striving for 1,000 subscribers. You want to be a guest? No problem. Participate in the chat room. That's one way to do it. Or go out there and contact us at South Florida Tribune at gmail.com. So once again, our goal is 1,000 subscribers. Please also like, share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? I already mentioned it. South Florida Tribune at gmail.com. Want to advertise? 954-304-4941 gets it done as well. Boy, I like the word it gets it done. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Anybody else have any closing thoughts about the Kentucky Derby? The floor is wide open for anybody to say something about it.
Well, I read in the article I read about it that if you hit the trifecta on a dollar bet, it'd have been $932.
Yeah.
If you added the superfecta at 4th place of Disarm, it was $15,132.98 on a $1 bet.
That's why I play the superfectas.
Hey, listen, the only time I ever bet on horse racing is when I was actually covering the Florida Derby. That was it here in Hallandale, Florida. All right, well, we'll go over to the gridiron, shall we? So, John, let's talk about handicapping spring football. You know, you have a lot of unknown players in the United States Football League and the XFL. Is there a trick to doing it? How do you do it? Because everybody loves to go ahead and bet on football, but now you have 2 leagues where, you have guys that are looking to get to the next level.
Well, I'll be short and sweet on this one, Scott, because unlike my long talk about the Kentucky Derby, I really let it to the scouts. They know what they're doing. Those are the players that are going to get put on the NFL rosters. And then once they are on the roster, then it becomes an attention getter. And then I go back and look at the history of that player. So for me to spend time, trying to analyze like which players may get to the NFL or which ones should get there, I have found to be a little bit of a time-consuming effort, an endeavor that I don't really Like I love watching the games. I love betting on the games, especially live in-game betting. But to determine like what the spring football means, even at the college level, Scott, it's like watching Penn State football or watching the spring games of Georgia or the big programs. I watch them and I'm very impressed. But what matters to me is who the coach then puts on the varsity roster to start the season. And those names that are new names on those rosters, I will then go and research their history at the high school level and whatever level they played at. So that's my take on that.
All right, Jeremy.
The spring football, you're talking about USFL and XFL and all of that, right?
Correct.
Well, I do like what they're doing in the games because you can actually watch the line change as the score changes, which is really cool. And also, if it doesn't change, the over-under, you will watch that thing plummet. Then the first time somebody scores a touchdown, it jumps back up by like 10 points. So it's really cool to see the live betting aspect while you're watching the games. But for the most part, I wouldn't bet on teams where I don't know half the roster.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, Chris Pirtle must be off. He must have lost his transmission. No problem. Welcome to.
Well, Scott, I'll take the next stab at it, and I agree with Jeremy. I don't know enough about the roster. I mean, look at the Michigan Panthers. They started 2-0, a lot of optimism. They get home, those two first ones on the road, they get home in Ford Field, their new home. They lay an egg, and now they laid another egg. They lost to a team, Memphis, who was winless this year. Now, I'm going to go to my first game, guys, this Saturday, and I'm expecting a better effort by those Panthers. I wasn't able to cover the last two at home, but I am going to go this Saturday, May 13th. That's a 12:30 start, by the way, folks. And you people in Michigan, go out there and support this team. Tickets are so cheap.
I know. I want to go so bad.
$10 only, Jeremy. Even your boys can afford that.
Right. I can afford it. I got to have the day off work.
I know you do. But anyways, I'm saying, and that's what I mean, John. It's so hard to predict because, like Jeremy says, you don't know who's on the field one time to the next. But it's exciting because those guys are trying to earn jobs, and then you're right. They're trying to make scouts look at them so they get a shot at an NFL training camp or an invite.
I don't know what Mike Nolan is doing at quarterback, but from what I've seen these last two games, he should have left Carson Strong in.
Yeah, I kind of sense that too.
Yeah.
Because Josh Love looks good in the beginning, but once he comes back in after sitting, and Carson Strong's in a rhythm and looking good, they pull him and put Josh Love back in, and he looks lost like a babe in the woods, overthrowing guys by 10 yards.
Yeah, that's bad. Yeah, that's not good.
It makes me think of that one guy that always plays the goofy guys in the movies with the cross eyes and doing stuff like this. That's what it reminds me of, watching him throw the football in the second half.
It's funny.
Yeah, I mean, the Panthers have looked awful the last 2 weeks, and the saddest part about it is they're actually playing on their home field. So
yeah.
And Will Vogel brought up a horse last week on our Kentucky Derby show. I wanted to give him an honorable mention. He did place 10th, so he was in the middle of the field.
And Will's got a comment too, Scott, I see, about the USFL.
Yeah, I'm going to put it up and you get to read it.
Oh, okay. I like seeing USFL games and leagues like that. Some of the players are former NFL players trying to get back to the NFL, and some are guys trying to make an NFL roster.
And he's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Do you know some of the greats that started in the USFL the first go around?
Steve
Young, Reggie White.
Yep.
I mean, there was some Herschel Walker.
Bobby Aber, remember Scott, and John Porter.
Rod Smart, he hate me from the XFL.
The kicker.
Well, let me tell you, you're forgetting about Jim Kelly.
Anthony Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Jim Kelly. Herschel Walker, right?
Yeah.
Herschel Walker.
Yep.
Oh, there's a ton of wide receivers too. Some of the names don't come to mind, but
most of them ended up being special teamers or third and fourth wide receivers in the NFL. Anthony Carter And there was one other one you mentioned. That was the big ones that came in and made an impact because they were either a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 1. Warren Rocket Ishmael, he went straight to the NFL, I thought, and then just was a bust.
Yeah, and Will, by the way,
Yeah.
Warren Moon went from the Canadian Football League over to the Houston Oilers.
Yep.
With Hugh Campbell. So
PFL.
so now that's okay. Well, I mean, they're Canadian Football League before these other leagues actually went out there.
Yeah, Canadian Football League's been around, what, half as long as the NFL, I believe?
Over 100 years, isn't it?
Yeah, I know the NFL's been around over 100 years. So I think Canadian.
Well, I think the Canadian Football League's played over 100 years as well, if I remember right. So
Yep, no problem.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But you know what? Before you had USFL, XFL, and whatnot, guys would play in Canada to try to do what they've got to do. So, yeah, I mean, the first thing with the USFL produced a lot of players. You mentioned Steve Young, Jim Kelly, Doug Flutie, Herschel Walker, just to name a few. And I had the good fortune of going out there and covering the league. So it was really pretty good. I'm glad it's back. I really, really am. So,
Yeah.
I hope they actually do something. It looks like they got some good sponsorships. The CFL is 65 years old. Okay. Thank you, Will.
Okay. Thank you, Will.
Is it 65 years old? Yeah, but they've had the Grey Cup around over 100 years, haven't they?
Yeah, but the Grey Cup was their college football championship before it became professional.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's interesting to know. Okay, well, whatever. But all right, well, thanks for the research. He's pretty good at researching stuff anyways. All right, so any closing thoughts on the USFL spring football in general, or we feel we've covered it?
I hope it makes it further than it did last time because it was a lot of fun to watch, but we got to get fans out there. They want that lower bowl filled, and then they'll get better sponsorships. So if that lower bowl doesn't fill for the home games, guess what? Next year, Detroit won't have home games for the Michigan Panthers. They're going to bounce it around for a little while until they get either stadiums of their own or they get a good deal from an NFL stadium.
Yeah, the thing you should feel good about this USFL is Fox owns it. So Fox wants the programming. And to me, that's a good situation that Fox owns the league and NBC's a partner in terms of actually sharing the broadcast.
Yes, they
and
are.
Mike Pereira is doing all that. So very good. All right. Well, we have two other sports I want to get to while we have an opportunity. Last night, what an incredible game. The two games we're going to talk about tonight will be overtime games. First, Florida Panthers had a 3-2 win over the Toronto Maple Leafs, 3-0 lead in the series. And overtime, I'll tell you what, the Florida Panthers are proving that, like anything else, if you ride a hot goaltender a la Sergei Bobrovsky, they're dangerous. If you don't believe that, the Boston Bruins will tell you. Don't believe that, the Toronto Maple Leafs are about to find out, being down 3-0. All right, John, you want to talk some NHL and NFL? There you go.
Sure. The NHL game, the Panthers are the real deal. Certainly, I rode them 3 of their 4 wins in the Boston Bruins game. My models came up with them, and believe me, I looked at it and I was like, this can't be right. So sometimes you go back and check, the math and make sure that everything is entered right and that it is actually a recommendation to bet on a dog of 220 in a playoff game against a team that set the all-time record win percentage in the regular season. So that's where the numbers help me overcome my subjective personality. It's human nature to think, well, the Florida Panthers have no chance against the Bruins. You kidding me? They're not going to win. But that's kind of where I've learned over 28 years where the opportunity may lie. And I think, I said it yesterday before Game 3. I actually had a top-rated play on the under. And nothing better, guys, than having a 2-2 overtime game with a total of 6.5. I mean, it really doesn't get any better than that. But that was a game that set up where if Toronto was going to get back into the series, they really had to play defense. And they did. They actually did play quality defense. They played much better in the first 2 games, but it still didn't work out because Florida has that magic wand that you said, the goaltender. And the goaltender, like in baseball, sometimes that baseball as a hitter looks like the size of a beach ball. Well, the puck right now to the Florida goaltender looks like the size of a beach ball, and he can save everything. And confidence in in any sport level, whether you're eighth grade basketball or whether you're a senior in high school quarterback or whether you're at the pro level and the top of the world in the sport that you're playing, confidence is everything. You're seeing it in the Tampa Bay Rays. You saw it a little bit with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Maybe they bounce back. But these teams, they get on a roll, they get the chemistry, they like each other, and Florida has it. So, 3-0 now, that series is pretty much done.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's go ahead. Well, Vogel says Leafs advanced the second round since 2004. Yeah, they are looking foolish, and the Panthers are really underrated team this year, including the regular season. Well, part of that's attributed to a coaching change. Paul Maurice took over, and the team obviously began to play better at the right time. And then we'll go to Will's other comment, and then I'll turn over to George. All right. Well, let's take the other one off and then put the other one up, because this is one that I think we can all agree with. Okay. My opinion, the NHL playoffs are the best professional sports. Well, that's an exclamation point. Oh, you nailed it.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Yep.
George.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I told you guys a couple of weeks ago when I was on the show when Scott took a break and Candy filled in, and I made that fabulous, absurd prediction that Florida was going to be the Eastern Conference representative in the Stanley Cup Finals. One thing you got to really think about here, and yeah, you can say they scraped their way in, but they competed to the very end to get their way in.
Right.
There's a lot to be said for a team like that, as opposed to Boston wearing this crown and winning and winning and winning and setting this record and that record.
And then sitting everybody.
Exactly. Now, Toronto, they were competing too. Of course, they're competing different levels of competition. You're competing for home ice advantage. You're competing to win the number 2 slot or the number 1 slot. I mean, there's different levels of competition. But all I can do is give Florida a lot of credit. And Paul Maurice, and Scott, he has roots back to Detroit with some of his coaching way back when. I always admired him as a head coach when he was involved with, the minor league team that was here in Detroit, playing at Plymouth, the Plymouth Arena. And, I tell you what, the Florida, it's like a magic carpet ride. Like we're watching Aladdin here. The Panthers, the way they're going.
Well, on last Wednesday's edition of the Sports Exchange at 9 o'clock, I told you guys I felt this series was going to go 4 or 5 at the very most, and I really told you.
You did, yes.
Played 4. I mean, let's face it, the Toronto Maple Leafs, good year, but if the Panthers are able to take out Boston and Toronto, you think of how many the 2 teams that they eliminated point-wise.
Oh,
pretty good.
Oh, unbelievable. And you're right. And Toronto, my gosh, the fans have been waiting since, I believe, 1967, since they won their last Stanley Cup. I mean, it's incredibly bad. And they have some of the best fans. Them and Montreal, probably the 2 best fan bases ever. But all I'm saying is that Toronto, Brendan Shanahan, President Shanahan, something's wrong here, buddy.
He's not happy. He's not happy.
Yeah, that's true.
You're right, Jeremy.
All right. So, any closing thoughts on the NHL? I know, John. What do you think? Can the Panthers?
I'm just pulling up the futures market for the Panthers, and they're really still not getting the respect that they deserve. They're number 2 to win it all at 375.
Right.
I can't even remember what they were when George made his call that they were going to be the Eastern Conference representative. But let's say it probably had to be 1,500, plus 1,500 at least.
Right.
The Hurricanes are plus 400. They have their hands full. The Golden Knights were smoked in their last game.
Right.
I don't know why they're actually ahead of the Edmonton. No, they're not ahead of the Edmonton Oilers, but they got smoked. They should be lower than the Devils and lower than the Stars, or at least lower than the Stars in terms of pricing. So I think if all those teams, the Golden Knights are probably the most overvalued, and the Panthers, in my opinion, still at 375 offer a good value bet.
All right. So what I'm going to do is the last question I have before we go on to our final topic tonight. In the last several years, Florida Panthers haven't been able to sniff a national telecast very much. I mean, let's face it, reputation doesn't help many. And yet the Red Wings, even in rebuilding, being original six, they get on more than the Panthers. I'll start off with Jeremy. Do you think the Florida Panthers will be on more national television next year, Jeremy?
It didn't work for them the first time they won a Stanley Cup. They went up by 3 games.
The Florida Panthers I'm talking about.
Yeah, the Florida Panthers. I'm talking about the Florida Panthers.
Right.
Didn't they go to the Stanley Cup? Not that when back around their inception, like their second year in the league.
90s. Right.
And then the next year, they only got 3 or 4 more national TV games.
Right.
It's not a market for national TV. I don't know what it is about the Florida place, but because of it being mostly Michiganders, you know what plays more in Florida than it does in Michigan? Detroit Red Wings.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt about that. All right.
Amazing.
What about you, George? You think the Panthers will get any more national television appearances?
I think they'll get a couple more appearances next year, Scott, based upon what happened this year. But you guys are right. I mean, they love that Eastern New York Rangers, Washington Capitals, Pittsburgh Penguins, that Philadelphia and Detroit. I mean, they love that same diet of games, I'm saying. And you're right, Scott. They always like the original 6, a Chicago, a Detroit, and
Montreal,
Boston, of course. But I mean, there's a heavy diet always of that Eastern Seaboard influence, I call it, the NHL on no matter what network. Pick your network, ABC, NBC, Fox, whoever is carrying the games this particular time, ESPN, TNT. They always love those Eastern games. But you're right, Jeremy. They don't draw well when they have a Florida or a Tampa Bay as their main game.
All right, John, I have to put it in betting terms. What do you think the odds are that the Florida Panthers get on national TV next year? Here's the way we got to do it. Jeremy, George, and then we have to put John, the betting man, here on here to quantify what we're talking about.
I'd probably line it at plus 250 that they get more games on national TV, but my heart would want to say that they deserve it. I was thinking about the Buffalo Bills. After they lost 4 Super Bowls, they were kind of out of touch with national TV. And it's the markets that they're in. The Florida Panthers are not in the Northeast where the Flyers and the Rangers and the Islanders. And that's unfortunate. But eventually, a team becomes as good as the Florida Panthers and they win that Stanley Cup. People are going to, hockey fans are going to want to see them next year, more so than they did this year because they missed out. And that's kind of how I feel about the Buffalo Bills now because, they're a primetime, Sunday night, 8:00 football team. And I think that's where the Florida Panthers belong if they win this Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah, you just nailed it there, John. If they win this Stanley Cup, they're going to force the national TV networks to
You think it's the finals.
Right. Well, that too. If they don't, sorry, folks, the Red Wings are going to do
it. Right, it's an also ran.
Right, if they're in that Stanley Cup matchup, I predict it'll be 2 to 4 games they get more next year in the national spotlight. If they win it, it could be as much as 8.
Yeah,
well, I can tell you this much.
I said much. I didn't say it would be.
For my South Florida people, Craig Minervini and Jessica Blaylock, they'll have more time to do a lot of things. And God love Jessica. She's an absolute sweetheart. And Craig's been a good pal of mine. So, all right, final topic of the night, NBA Philadelphia 76ers. The man wearing the hat is J.R. Ryan, okay? 116-115 over Boston overtime. That series is deadlocked at 2-2. All right, John, you wanted to talk basketball? Give me your assessment on this one.
I don't know even where to begin with it. Personally, I always emphasize with my clients discipline. You bet the same amount every single game, whether it's a 5-unit, a 5%, or an 8%er. I had an 8% on the Sixers, and I decided, even though it won, I decided foolishly to up it a little bit. I kind of got a little bit fooled myself with the numbers and thought, this is a really great opportunity. The reason was that one of the trends that Philly came into was that Boston made 16 or more three-pointers in each of the last 2 playoff games. Teams that have done that and then been favored in the next game were 1-10 straight up, 1-10 against the spread. So I saw that, and I violated my discipline. I went a little bit overboard. Well, not overboard. I just added to it instead of betting in game. And of course, I'm feeling proud as a peacock at my excellent intelligence to increase my bet during 3 quarters. So I decided the game was over in my mind, and I left to run some errands. And my last errand was stopping by the restaurant to pick up food. I walk in and the place is going crazy. And then I look at the score, and it's those hashtag WTF moments where you just like, am I really seeing this? Boston is winning. Well, adding to it, I love the Patriots. I like the Bruins. I hate. That's a strong word. But I don't like the Celtics. I haven't liked the Celtics since Larry Bird played Julius Erving. I haven't liked the Celtics since Larry Bird probably played, to be honest. But that's my own opinion. He's a great player. He's in the Hall of Fame. But the one thing I hated most in this game when I was starting to get caught up on it was the officiating. It has been just atrocious. And it's been inconsistent on both sides. I'm not saying that the Sixers were robbed of a game potentially, or that the Celtics were robbed of a game potentially. But the one play that really stuck out in that fourth quarter was where Jason Tatum had the ball against Maxey and elbowed him in the chest, like pretty hard. And Maxey isn't a big guy, but he goes flying backwards. No call. Tatum steps back, makes the three, and then is looking at the ref like, why didn't I get the N1? That's the part of NBA right now I don't like. And it seems to be running rampant across the board in all the games where these guys are either, I don't want to say they're making it up, but it does appear just so inconsistent that it is affecting the quality of the play on the floor. One other thing I will mention quickly is Embiid looked gassed in the fourth quarter. From the time that I left, I had a perspective of not watching it. And the first thing I saw was that he looked like he, was done, like physically just exhausted. And, he trusted his teammate at the end there, Harden, to make that three. That's all that was. Normally, Embiid would take Horford and Tatum and stuff that in the basketball through the net. But he was 4 feet from the basket, and I'm wondering, like, why isn't he putting this up? He dishes it out to Harden on a contested shot. Harden makes it, fortunately, and the Sixers win. Now, granted, I had +2 on the bet, and I added later because there was a ton of money coming in from smart money on the Sixers. It took the line down to pick them, and I thought, you know what, this is a special situation, so that's where I added at pick 'em. But still, when it went to overtime, my goodness, if you weren't, on the edge of your seat worried, then you're not even an amateur bettor, I guess,
or a fan.
Okay, so let me go over a couple things that Will Vogel talked about. Harden is finally showing up in the playoffs. Well, better late than never. And Embiid is playing like the MVP that he deserves this year. Yeah, but you know what? You're right about that. But like John said, he's gassed. Now, Will has a special request for you, John. So we're going to put that up. We're going to turn it over to George and then Jeremy. Okay.
Yeah, I talk too much.
Oh, no, you're fine. If you didn't talk too much, I'd worry, but I'm not. Okay, so here, you talk so much that this guy would like to know if you want to come on an edition of Basket Bros, because we don't like today's NBA. So, but just so you know, it comes on Sunday night around 7:30 or so. So, if you're interested in coming on, we'll talk about it later or
sure.
in Twitter. Okay, well, you got your answer on
Sunday nights are, that's good. That would work, yeah.
Okay, well, John and I will talk about it, and then we'll get it set up from there. There you go, Will. You got your question answered. All right. So what?
I will say one more thing, Scott, if I may.
Sure. Yeah.
It drives me crazy when people, especially in the Philadelphia and New York markets, are abusing Harden for not showing up in games 2 and 3. He has 11 games in his career in the playoffs of 40 or more points. The he's never not had a season where he wasn't in the playoffs. So to say that he's not showing up, I think if you look at the whole ball of wax of each series he's played, especially with Houston, he's more than showed up, and he still has shown, even at his age now, that he can still do it. And we'll just have to see. Tuesday's going to be very tough. The trends and the angles, I'll tell you right now, work in Boston's favor. But I think when you win a game by 1 point in overtime, and now the pressure is all on Boston. Boston's the better team. The media in Boston's telling them, you're the better team. How can this series be 2-2 against the lowly 76ers?
Right.
The 76ers have a chance here to pull the upset, and getting 7.5 points right now is pretty attractive to me. And not because I'm wearing the hat or that I'm a homer or anything like that. The number feels right to me to put some dough on the Sixers on tomorrow night's game.
Okay, fair enough. All right, George.
Oh, you talk about drag. Oh my God. Knockdown, drag out affair. Well, I tell you what, this series is incredible. And I do agree, though, with a lot of the people that are jumping on Harden's case because, yes, he had a great game 1 and a great game 4, game 2 and 3, not so good. You brought up a good point, though, John. Okay, he's a crafty veteran. He's been in the league a long time. He's got some age on that frame of his. Obviously, he's been around quite a while, and you can't put everything on his shoulders, on his frame. I will say this, though. I mean, oh my God, could you imagine Beantown if Boston does go down, losing the Bruins, and then if they lose the Celtics too? Holy cow. I wouldn't want to be a fan there. I don't want to be a fan there anyways, but all that being said, it's just been one hell of a series. But I do agree with you. I think this next game is going to tell a big story because if Boston does not come back and win this game, and they will be favored, then it could be lights out for them. They got to win. They have to win game 5, the Celtics, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Okay, Jeremy.
I am one of those ones that jumped on Harden because I've watched him in consistent playoff games. He'll have 2 or 3 good games and then fail to close out in his history. He's had good games here, good games there, but it required the supporting cast to do what they have to do to close the games out to make it to a next round. And he hasn't done it pretty much since that year that they had that run in Oklahoma City when it was Westbrook, Harden, and Durant. So since then, he hasn't, in half the time, he's injured through the playoffs and they don't make it past that next round. So
you think this
see
is
him playing
pass he needs?
This is his best chance, but he has to play better than okay ball the rest of this series. If he does his average, and I'm not talking about the 40 points, if he's putting up that 25 to 30 points a game, 6 to 8 assists, and 2 to 4 defensive stats, along with the rest of the complementary pieces with the 76ers, it'll be great. But he cannot do it consistently is the only thing I have to say.
All right, well, I'll close it out this way. Number 1, Doc Rivers, don't worry about losing your job. You're not going to lose it, okay? Number 2, I wouldn't be surprised to see Harden return to Houston at some point. There's talk about it. I have a feeling that he may wind up there at some point. We all know that Philadelphia is a tough place to play. We really, really do. But let's face the reality, the 76ers haven't won a title. George, how long has it been? I want to say 1983.
84.
Oh, it's a long time.
Was it 83 or 84? I know.
83 season. 83 season. Yep.
Dr. J was still playing, right?
Exactly. No, but no, there's nothing to laugh about. That's how starved these fans are.
Oh, I know. I would love it for Philly.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great story. And you know what? I was actually happy that Joel Embiid won the MVP. This guy here, to me, has overcome a lot injury-wise. And think about it. He's a heck of a center. Joel Embiid is one of those kind of players that could play in any era of basketball. Well, do you get that? Okay. I know you're probably still listening, and maybe it'll trigger another comment out of you. But the reality of the situation is Joel Embiid can play in any era of basketball. So, you know what's neat about this show is we were able to touch on a lot of different things. I like to mix it up a great deal anyways. and to be able to talk about the Derby, spring football, and two overtime games both in the NHL and the NBA was a real nice fitting end to what I considered a pretty good sports weekend for sure. So, so great job by you four. I know Chris had a lot of major technical difficulties. Perhaps when the time comes that should he be invited back, okay, we'll find out, but time will tell. At the moment, we just focus on doing the best we can and make sure that we give everybody what we need to do, and that's try to give you different perspectives. And as a result, we talk about the different sports. Well, I have enjoyed this broadcast as I do with a great crew. So, with that said, okay, Jeremy, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
You can find me on the South Florida Tribune.com underneath the Motor City Tribune heading with a list of authors like Scott Morganroth and George Eichhorn. You can also find me on Kneecap Biting with Smoke and Jeremy B on every other Wednesday, on Friday, every Friday, and every other Saturday now. I'm doing another Lions fan show with a couple other podcasters. Then you can find me whenever Scott needs me, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, right here on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel.
Well, don't worry, you'll be busy this week. Both Jeremy and George will be really busy this week. I can guarantee that. So, all right, John. Yeah, that's okay. I know it breaks your heart. That's okay. That's okay. And your laugh is not. Nobody can ever duplicate that laugh. I'll keep it up smoking. It's good. All right, John R. Let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Pretty simple. At John Ryan Sports and the number 1 on Twitter. I started an Instagram with the same handle a couple weeks ago. So both places provide a lot of situational angles and trends that are free, and you can use them as you see fit. I try to give out the best of the best and hopefully make you more astute, better at least in making your decisions. Of course, you can get my plays just by direct messaging me and finding out how to do that. And the predictiveplaybook.com is where I have myself and a bunch of other guys I've known for many, many years that are pretty darn good professional cappers. We all go through losing streaks, no smoke and mirrors here, and no BS. We'll have our 0-8 streak, promise you, over the course of a season. But over the longer term, I think you're going to like how the results come out for you.
And also, I should add that as time goes on, John's only been on 2 times a month, but that narrative is going to change, especially as we get closer to football season. I knew that there were a lot of good events leading up to football season, so it would behoove me not to allow John an opportunity to break in with the network here until things really get more and more busy later on in the year. So John's one of those kind of guys where if I contact him on Twitter and needed tomorrow, forget about next week. John did the politically correct thing with time, and that was all we had to do. Then again, a lot of guys on this crew are able to come on in short notice, which makes it even better. All right, George, you have the longest one, so we'll leave the longest. And by the way, Bill, before you do that, everybody, I want to wish George a happy anniversary, and I was at his wedding another lifetime ago.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
All right,
Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the air, yay! And Scott Morganroth in another lifetime, a long time ago, with hair. I shouldn't talk, Scott, because I had hair back in the day too. But
don't worry, mine grows faster than anybody. So
it sure does. But great stories, great traditions of Michigan sports broadcasting, including pictures with Ted Williams and Ernie Harwell and Hank Aaron and Muhammad Ali and Jimmy Connors are talking to Scott in his 2 interview photographs. It's a great story. I hope you can think about purchasing a copy in time for Father's Day as a gift. There's a link on the South Florida Tribune website, which I write to, as Jeremy mentioned, under Motor City Tribune. And I have a link right at the end of at the end of my column, rather, that you can order a copy of the book. You can reach me at gicorn@yahoo.com or George Eichhorn on LinkedIn. And you can reach me on Twitter at SNGSports99. You can find me on the Sports Exchange, on Fire Up, on 108 Stitches. And once in a while, I'm a guest on Basketball Bros, and once in a while on Pigskin. So I really appreciate being out here and being on all these great podcasts.
Oh, well, George, come on. You've been around forever, anyways. You're a natural. Right. I'll go over my information, but if you're on Twitter, feel free to follow us at Tribune South. Now, the audio version of Fire Up can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcast. So please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. We are striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Okay, I'm trying to go slow so nobody can accuse me of talking too fast. Want to be a guest? No problem. Send topic ideas to South Florida Tribune at gmail.com. If you want to advertise, call 954-304-4941. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Also, you want to find your way on this show? No problem. Contribute in the chat room, and that's another ticket in here for you as well. So, good show. Great way to start off the week. And you can also check out our website, www.southfloridatribune.com. And finally, kudos to Candy Ebling, who does an unbelievable job putting the shows up as well as the numerous content that she puts up there as well. So, you want to talk about an MVP behind the scenes? Candy Ebling is it. So, on behalf of Smoking Jeremy B., John Ryan, George Eichhorn, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Fire Up, and we will catch you the next time. Good evening, everybody.